In early spring 2021, Emily Hartwell was starting to feel hopeful again. At 26, she had been working steadily as a junior architect in Manchester, balancing long hours at a design firm with quiet evenings at home in her Chorlton flat. After a difficult breakup the previous year, she spent months healing, focusing on her career and friendships. She wasn't looking for anything dramatic, just someone kind, someone stable. With encouragement from her best friend Sophie, Emily downloaded Tinder, hoping for a fresh start in the dating world. She kept her expectations low, swiping carefully through profiles, ignoring the ones that felt off. Then, after a week of casual browsing, she came across Daniel Morgan. His pictures were simple but professional. A neat suit, a warm smile, coffee in hand, and a scenic photo of him standing near what looked like a waterfall in the Lake District. His bio read, "Finance consultant. Lover of books, live jazz, and strong coffee. Looking for something real." It was unassuming, but it caught her eye. Their match came within minutes. The conversation began that evening and flowed effortlessly. Daniel was attentive without being intense, charming without trying too hard. He asked thoughtful questions about her work and seemed genuinely interested in her stories about architecture and design. They spoke about favorite places to travel, childhood memories, and funny moments from past relationships. His responses were witty and grounded. He told her he worked in a private wealth firm near the city centre, lived alone, and had moved from London a year earlier for a better work-life balance. Over the next few days, their messages turned into voice notes, and eventually, short video calls. Daniel's face on screen matched the photos, clean-cut, well-spoken, a little shy but confident. He had an accent that sounded educated, yet casual. Emily found herself looking forward to their chats more than anything else in her routine. By Thursday, Daniel suggested meeting in person. He recommended a restaurant on the edge of spinning fields, popular but quiet enough to talk. It felt natural, not rushed. Friday evening arrived, and Emily took her time getting ready. She wore a soft blue blouse, light makeup, and a touch of perfume. Before leaving, she texted Sophie a photo of herself and Daniel's profile just to be safe. It was something they always did, a safety habit born out of too many bad dating stories in the news. Emily stepped out into the cool May air, unaware that it would be the last time anyone would see her. She arrived at the restaurant just after 8 p.m. Staff later recalled her sitting with a man who matched Daniel's description. They ate, laughed, and appeared to be enjoying themselves. At around 10:15 p.m., the pair were seen leaving together, walking toward the nearby parking garage. Emily never made it back home. By the next morning, her phone was off, and she wasn't answering calls or messages. What had seemed like a promising evening turned out to be the beginning of one of Britain's most disturbing crimes. When Emily didn't return home on Saturday morning, her absence was immediately noticed. She wasn't the kind of person to disappear without explanation. Her phone had been active the night before, but all messages stopped shortly after 10:30 p.m. Sophie, who had received Emily's last known location and a photo of her date, grew increasingly worried. By noon, with no replies to texts or calls and no updates on social media, Sophie contacted the police and Emily's parents. What began as concern quickly spiraled into panic. Greater Manchester Police took the report seriously. Emily's habits were well known. She stayed in regular contact with her friends and family, and she had no history of erratic behavior or mental health issues. Officers checked her flat and found everything in place. Her wallet and coat were gone, confirming she had gone out as planned. Nothing suggested she had planned to be away for more than an evening. A missing persons case was formally opened that afternoon. Investigators pulled CCTV footage from the restaurant and surrounding streets. The video confirmed that Emily had arrived around 8 p.m. and sat with a man who matched the photo she'd shared with Sophie. The pair left together at approximately 10:15 p.m., heading on foot toward a nearby multi-story car park. That was the last visual confirmation of her movements. Detectives began trying to identify the man. The name, Daniel Morgan, produced no useful leads. The Tinder account Emily had matched with was gone, deleted shortly after their date. Phone numbers, photos, and even metadata had been wiped. The man had left no digital footprint behind. His phone had either been turned off or destroyed. Police began to suspect the identity was fake. They moved quickly to track the car seen on CCTV leaving the garage shortly after the couple exited the restaurant. It was a silver Vauxhall Corsa, rented earlier that week under the name David Marks, with a fake address and forged license. The rental company hadn't flagged it until the police came asking. By the time it was located, 3 days had passed. The car was found abandoned on a rural roadside in Lancashire, miles from Manchester. Inside, the vehicle was mostly clean, too clean. Forensic teams used luminol to detect blood beneath the floor mats and in the trunk. The amount was significant, and DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Emily Hartwell. Her phone, however, was missing, and there were no fingerprints or hair left behind. Whoever had driven the car knew how to clean it professionally. The manhunt shifted focus. This was no accident. Investigators now believed Emily had been murdered. The killer had planned it in advance, using a false identity, burner phone, and disposable email to create a fake Tinder profile. Everything had been carefully calculated to avoid detection. There was still no sign of a body, but the evidence in the car was enough to classify the case as a homicide. What had begun as a date had turned into a cold, calculated trap. With growing media attention and public concern, the pressure on detectives intensified. The man known to Emily as Daniel Morgan had vanished without a trace, and the careful construction of his identity hinted at experience in deception. A breakthrough finally came when a facial recognition analyst at the National Crime Agency made a connection between the CCTV footage from the restaurant and a previously sealed file. The man was not Daniel Morgan. His real name was Jason Bell, a 33-year-old with a long history of fraud, manipulation, and violent behavior. Jason Bell had grown up in southern England in a privileged household, attending expensive schools and moving in elite social circles. But behind the clean-cut exterior was a disturbing pattern. In his late teens, he began using false identities to scam people, particularly women. He would create online personas, forge documents, and manipulate emotions to gain trust. In several cases, women reported him for stalking and emotional abuse, but he always managed to stay just within the lines of the law. When charged, he'd disappear, often resurfacing under a new name. Authorities had struggled to keep tabs on him because of his chameleon-like ability to vanish. He changed his appearance regularly, used prepaid phones, and never stayed in one place long. Despite numerous warning signs and reports from concerned victims, no case had ever escalated to the level that would keep him behind bars. Until now. After confirming his identity, police widened their search. A storage unit in Leeds, rented under yet another alias, was discovered during a financial sweep of known transactions linked to Jason's previous identities. The unit was secured and searched. Inside, detectives found a chilling collection of evidence: multiple women's belongings, fake passports, SIM cards, wigs, surveillance tools, and a blood-stained blanket wrapped in plastic. Forensic testing confirmed that the blood on the blanket was Emily Hartwell's. Security footage from the storage facility showed Jason entering the unit early on the morning after Emily's disappearance. He wore gloves, a surgical mask, and a baseball cap. He moved calmly, spending just under 12 minutes inside before leaving in a different vehicle than the one he'd driven with Emily. Police now believed he had planned not only the murder but also how to discard each piece of evidence in phases, using decoys, alternate transportation, and various drop-off locations. His web of identities began to unravel. Using data from the storage unit's access records and past financial activity, detectives discovered Jason had been active in at least 3 cities over the previous year: Manchester, Birmingham, and Sheffield. Each location had dating app usage linked to suspicious profiles, and several women came forward with eerie stories of charming men who vanished right after meeting them. Emily's murder was no impulsive act. It was the culmination of years of preparation, manipulation, and practiced deceit. Jason Bell wasn't just a fraud or a stalker, he was a predator. And now that the mask had been pulled off, investigators feared they were dealing with a man far more dangerous than they had imagined. Weeks passed without any trace of Emily's body. Although the discovery of blood evidence and Jason Bell's disturbing past confirmed foul play, the lack of a body left a critical gap in the case. Emily's family could not begin to grieve, and the public grew increasingly outraged. Authorities intensified their search, extending operations into rural areas where Jason had been seen or tracked. Every movement, every purchase, every mile he had driven after the murder was analyzed in painful detail. It was one of these records, a petrol station receipt from a small village near the Yorkshire Dales, that finally provided the break investigators had been waiting for. Search teams were dispatched to the area, combing through farmland, woods, and remote walking trails. On a quiet Monday morning, a dog walker in a wooded area near Malham noticed disturbed soil on the edge of a footpath. The ground looked uneven, and a faint smell lingered in the air. He called the police without touching anything. Within hours, the site was sealed, and forensic teams began carefully excavating the shallow grave. Inside was the body of a young woman wrapped in a tarp and partially covered with leaves and dirt. Despite the state of decomposition, dental records confirmed it was Emily Hartwell. The autopsy revealed she had died from blunt force trauma to the head and ligature strangulation. Defensive wounds on her hands suggested she had fought back. There were no drugs or alcohol in her system. It had been a swift but violent attack, most likely in the car or shortly after leaving the restaurant. The brutal nature of her death, combined with the effort to hide her body, left no doubt about Jason's intentions. With Emily's body found, the case was now fully solidified as a homicide, and the manhunt intensified. Tips from the public led to multiple false sightings, but eventually, a lead from a bus driver in Edinburgh offered real hope. He had seen a disheveled man sleeping in a parked car near a construction site and thought he resembled the wanted suspect. The license plate of the vehicle was traced to a cash rental in Glasgow, another identity tied to Jason Bell. Police moved in quickly, surrounding the area early the next morning. Jason was found sleeping in the back seat, with a knife and a burner phone beside him. He was arrested without incident. Officers noted his calm demeanor, as if he had been expecting the end. He did not resist, speak, or make any sudden moves. At the station, he remained silent for several hours before finally agreeing to speak with detectives. What followed was a series of carefully delivered admissions. Jason confessed to killing Emily but framed his actions with chilling detachment. He spoke as though the murder had been planned not out of rage but out of purpose. There was no remorse, no hesitation, and no humanity in his tone. As investigators listened, it became clear they were dealing with something far darker than they had prepared for. A man who had turned manipulation into a system and murder into a method. Inside the sterile, echoing walls of the interrogation room, Jason Bell calmly recounted the events of the night Emily died. He spoke with a disturbing clarity, outlining every detail not as a man driven by panic or passion, but as someone who had engineered every moment with precision. His confession was not a cry for help or a moment of guilt. It was more like the unveiling of a plan he believed had worked. He described watching Emily for weeks before they ever matched on Tinder. He had chosen her carefully, observing her social media, tracking her routines, even following her home on at least 2 occasions without her knowledge. When he finally made contact, he did so using a fake profile constructed with care, every word, every image, tailored to appeal directly to her interests and vulnerabilities. Jason claimed he saw Emily as too pure and too soft for the world. He used language that sounded almost poetic, trying to justify his actions as some form of twisted mercy. He referred to her murder as a release, saying he believed she would have suffered in life and that he had saved her from that. The chilling part wasn't just the act itself, it was the calm way he recounted it, as though it were a moral decision rather than a horrific crime. Investigators sat in silence as he explained how he had lured her, planned the route, and chose the isolated location where he eventually dumped her body. Every step had been rehearsed. In court, the case drew nationwide attention. The courtroom was packed, with journalists, victims of Jason's past deceptions, and members of the public all eager to witness the outcome. The evidence was overwhelming: digital trails, surveillance footage, DNA matches, and Jason's own confession. Emily's family sat through every detail, their faces pale but composed. Her father stared straight ahead, while her mother gripped a photograph of Emily through every session. Jason Bell was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The judge, in delivering the sentence, called him a cold-blooded predator and said the attack was premeditated in the most chilling sense. There was no moment of sorrow from Jason during the trial. He remained blank-faced, indifferent to the lives he had destroyed. His defense team tried to suggest diminished responsibility due to mental illness, but the court rejected it. His actions were calculated, not the result of any temporary psychosis. In the aftermath of the trial, dating apps across the UK introduced new verification measures, spurred by public outcry. Emily's parents launched the Hartwell Foundation, a non-profit aimed at raising awareness about the dangers of digital impersonation and online predators. Schools and universities began implementing safety workshops focusing on online dating. Emily had gone out on a simple date with hope in her heart and ended up the victim of one of the most calculated murders Britain had ever seen. Her story became a symbol of the urgent need for safety in a world where trust could be manufactured with a few swipes and a stolen smile.